Drums of War, Chapter 14, Jacuvia burns. In a defensive position on Jacuvia, Guardsman Swastos gripped his royal lance tightly. Surely, there were not mistakes that could not find absolution when one returns to the great egg with a tail still attached. Surely, if a weight had to be borne, it could be borne, and if a weight could be borne, he was strong enough to bear it. Surely it was so. Surely. It was his fault, his blunder that had brought the kingdom to this. Guardsman Swastos knew it. His commander knew this. His lance mates knew this. Yet they saw he faced the burden, that he shouldered the fault in his best way he could. "My life for Jacuvia," he whispered. "May the great egg take my soul, and find it cleansed by this deed. O great egg, let me face the enemy with my meager might, and buy the vital seconds for an innocent to escape." Nobody criticized his prayer. Surely he could bear it. Surely he could return to the great egg, cleansed. The lance mate to Guardsman Swastos left whispered softly, "Third Prince Sepsis looks upon our deeds this day." Guardsman Swastos did not complain at his lance-mate heaping more weight on him to carry. Instead he replied, "May he forgive me when he does." Yes. Guardsman Swastos gripped his royal lance tightly. The Exarch were coming. Third Prince Sepsis had fallen in battle in the very sky he gazed upward into. The orbital defense platforms had been shattered. The ground batteries had been bombarded. The enemy had only needed a fleet of 10 battleships and the attendant escorts to do it with. And Guardsman Swastos had to face the bitter truth that the kingdom of Jacuvia was not prepared. That the clans of Eldra were not a stone to the hunting svesk of the Exarch. No, the clans had been fat prey, and the Exarch had gorged themselves before lunging for another bloated prey who thought itself safe. The dropships looked like specks in the sky as they began to descend. Guardsman Swastos gripped his royal lance tightly. The specks began to grow into discernible shapes. The Exarch dropships were bulky things, covered in weapons and harsh angles. They were ugly things. Guardsman Swastos had often heard his fellow high society types disparage human ships as being much the same. But the sheer deadly capacity, coupled by the precision restraint of Terrans, was a thing of beauty to his mind. Terrifying, but beautiful. The remaining anti-air batteries opened up. The air superiority fighters screamed overhead to meet the invading dropships. They were met by Exarch air superiority fighters. The dropships came closer. Guardsman Swastos gripped his royal lance tightly. His commander was making a speech to inspire courage in the guardsmen under his command. Guardsman Swastos knew that he was going to the Great Egg soon. He would do so with his tail attached. Spiritually speaking, the spirit matron had assured him that if he got blown to bits, it didn't count as detaching. The dropships started raining down hot plasma on the anti-air batteries. The dropships came closer. Guardsman Swastos gripped his royal lance tightly. He had never taken a life before, not even fishing. He'd never been in a real fight before either, and even the intense training he'd gone through after volunteering wasn't truly a fight. His instructors were making him stronger. He'd been weak for so long, weak and lazy. He'd never thought that laziness and weakness on his part could have any consequences at all. He trusted the strength of those around him. He'd counted on his subordinates to simply do his job for him, and his superiors to compensate for what he neglected. "They come," someone whispered. The dropships disgorged infantry and armored vehicles, and the ground fighting began. Guardsman Swastos gripped his royal lance tightly. Ahead of him, there was a formation of infantry supported by an armored vehicle, and they were headed to his and his lancemate's position. He leveled his royal lance and took aim at the enemy soldier, and ignored the hot plasma impacting the sandbags of his fighting position. He depressed the firing stud and took his first lift. The lancemate to his left screamed, "Third Prince Sepsis looks upon this lance with pride. Not one step backward, brood brothers! Not one step back!" All of the lancemates screamed. Deep within a civilian shelter on Jacuvia, Brood Matron Sala did not show her fear before the neons. They were frightened enough as it was. She would not add to their distress by showing that the big, strong Brood Matron was also frightened. She had no young menfolk about to help her mind them, and their mothers were likewise occupied with other duties in the shelter. Only some grayscale menfolk and ladyfolk, and they lacked the patience to properly look after the energetic neons on a good day, let alone on a day when their fathers stood above ground with lances in their hands. She had heard disturbing things about the invaders and what they did to the larvae of the dynasticals. The nurse came into her chamber and asked, "Do you need anything, brood matron? Your children's film will do well. Something about friends going on an adventure together." The nurse glanced over the huddled neons and gave Sulla a tight nod. "Yes, I think we can accommodate that. Are there any injuries?" "Not any of the neons," Sulla said, "but I suspect that Grayscale over there broke his foot." "Coddle swap," the H-man shouted. "I'm perfectly fine. You need to waste valuable resources on me." Despite his protests, the nurse had crossed the chamber in a flash and was already scanning his foot. "Yep, that's 3 bones fractured, sir. Please remain seated. My colleagues will be by with the gurneys shortly." "Don't bother," he said. "I'm not likely to live long enough." "The neons will need as many able-bodied folk to look after them as we can manage," Suda said, with a meaningful glance at the Grayscale. He gave the huddled group of terrified neons a long look and finally said, All right. I'll cooperate. I shall need a hand lance, I think, just in case we find a sneaky one." Sula was pleased to see that the neons found the idea of grumpy Grayscales being armed calmed them. She vowed then and there that they would not be taken alive. "Yes, I'll need one too, just in case." The shelter shook under the weight of the battle above. "Just in case," the nurse whispered. Above, in a defensive position. It had been days of bitter fighting. Guardsman Swartzstas had lost count of the people he'd killed, but he and his lancemates had fulfilled their promise. Not one step back. Their lance had been whittled down to a mere 10 men, though, and they had to rotate shifts on the heavy weapons to keep the tanks at bay. He no longer felt that his lancemates were heaping more weight upon him when they mentioned the third Prince Vesvek looked upon his deeds. He would go to the great egg, cleansed of his folly, of his weakness. He'd been awake for only a few hours, but the stress of the battle had made it feel like weeks. He couldn't decide whether it was better or worse that the enemy had stopped marching down the street in nice, tight formations. On the one hand, engagements were far shorter, but on the other hand, there were much, much more of them. There was also the fact that the enemy had gotten good at picking off guardsmen who stood up to change position. The 10 lancemates left had gotten good at the crouch run. Guardsman Swartzstas was starting to feel sleep dragged at his mind, so he licked his eyes to clear the fog in them. He saw him, an explosive soldier, getting what his lancemates had named a death tube ready to fire directly into their fighting position. He tried to take aim, but the angle was wrong. He couldn't get a bead on the enemy. He needed to be just a little higher off the ground. Guardsman Swartzstas didn't have time to run to another position. A quick glance showed him that his fellows were even more fatigued than he was. He stood up and took the shot. The explosive soldier lost his head, dropped the death tube, and the explosive charge detonated, hopefully killing any other nearby enemies. Guardsman Swartzstas lay on the ground with a hole burned through his armor and his chest. He went to the great egg. "Brood brother," a lancemate said softly, as the dark took Guardsman Swartzstas. "You brought pride to our brood. May the great egg take you in clean." Guardsman Vezes kept the grief keen from escaping him as he watched his brood brother, not by hatching, but by its crucible, fade into the embrace of the great egg. The man had carried a great weight. All knew that he'd done it to himself, but all also knew that he took up a burden of writing what he could. He had done himself and his prince well. Instead, Guardsman Vezes took aim at the motherless cur that had killed his friend, and had pressed the firing stud on his royal lance. "Not one step back!" he screamed. "Not one step back!" his lancemates answered. End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.